to the latest Capital and Kayfabe episode. I'm your co-host, JP Jampaz from the Two-Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is the man himself, the political pundit himself, Mr. Jack Hunter. Jack, welcome back. How you doing?
Good to be with you as always. Looking forward to this today.
Capital and Kayfabe. I love this title. I love what we're talking about here. It's so much correlation between wrestling and politics, especially nowadays. But the kind of the first thing that I wanted to talk about wrestling and politics, and it will make sense. It will come together here, Jack. The big beautiful bill. What in the world is this thing? I was reading it. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lot smarter than me. We both didn't like it. But what is the big beautiful bill? What is going on with this thing?
Well, it does lots of things. The things that conservatives or Trump supporters like is it reaffirms the tax cuts from 2017, which it should do. And I think everybody supports that, at least within the Republican Party. Even critics like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul support that. Allowing Medicaid for illegal aliens, obviously that's bad. This bill, from my understanding from Senator Paul, is that it would allow it for about a year, then address it. Senator Paul's introducing legislation to get rid of that now as part, whatever. It has some modest decreases in spending, but the biggest problem with it, and the reason Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and Elon Musk is criticizing it harshly, we've got a $37 trillion national debt. And I think the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimated that 2.7 trillion would be added with this bill. So the point is we need to go in the opposite direction to less spending. And the debt ceiling will be raised by 5 trillion. Rand Paul met with J.D. Vance right before the Senate version passed and said, look, I'll vote for this bill. Instead of a $5 trillion debt ceiling increase, we make it 500 billion. Something smaller, which is still too much, but it's better. Yeah. They wouldn't go for it. So that this is where we're at. I mean, are we going to have $198 trillion deficit in 20 years? And like, who doesn't think that that's not heading towards collapse? So the hardcore fiscal hawks are saying, look, MAGA, we promised spending cuts. We got the ball rolling in your second term with Elon Musk and Doge was looking for 2 trillion in cuts. And that's what we were going to do. And it seems like all that's out the window. Nobody's talking about spending cuts. The only Doge cuts that have passed was 9.6 billion. That's nothing to this federal government. So I'm not happy about it. You said you and your friend read it, aren't happy about it. If this MAGA version of the Republican Party can't do something serious about spending, who in the hell's going to do it? It's not the other party, and certainly not a Mitt Romney type Republican or somebody like that. So, yeah, it's kind of disappointing. So it's gone to the House now. We'll see what happens there.
It's just, to me, it's like I thought we were cutting. Doge was going to cut. What happened to all that? We kind of went totally away from that. Was that just all for show? Was that just all a work? I mean, what happened to all the cuts?
I mean, I think Trump meant it when he said it, but his personality can get sideways with another personality, and that affects policy. You see Musk and Trump going at it, and then they'll both say, like, well, we shouldn't be this sideways, and then they go do it again. It's like, well, that's nice, fellas, and, keep acting like children, but what about spending our children into debt, like America's children into debt, and what they're going to have to face because we're too stupid or messed up to fix this problem, which is what Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are saying. Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying this, Warren Davidson, congressman. So it's not just Massie and Paul, the two most libertarian Republicans in Congress, but it's others of like mind who understand the seriousness of the spending problem with this bill.
I feel like the ICE part of it too kind of confused me because we're already spending a ton of that. Now we're going to spend like 40 times that, or would I read that wrong? It seemed like way more on ICE and stuff like that.
Right. And how about let's be more efficient and do what needs to get done and not spend all this money once again. So yeah, and these omnibus bills, like Massey is right. Like I want to vote on, or he wants to vote on one particular item instead of throwing 90 things all together. I don't know how many people watched his interview with Theo Von, the popular podcaster, about 2 weeks ago. And what did Theo Von say? Oxygen for grandmothers is in this bill. If you vote against this bill, you're against oxygen for grandmothers. And I think Massey said, I think I voted against oxygen for grandmothers. Now, what he's saying, nobody's against oxygen for grandmothers, but when it's thrown in with 89 other things that are terrible and they lump it all together, that's how they go after him. Like, these stupid attack ads that the Trump PAC is running in Kentucky say stuff like that. And he was just pointing out the absurdity of it. So, yeah, if we could change the the voting process, particularly when it comes to government spending, that would be nice too.
It just seems like I think here it seems like they're doing a good job right now with what they have with Tom Homan and the security and everything. So why would we need to spend even more on it if they're already doing a good job on it now? It just seems like wasted money that might be going in somebody's pockets here or there.
Special interests, people wanting what they want, what you just said. And look, let's turn that around. Conservatives are pretty happy right now that it looks like we might be getting rid of the Department of Education. Well, advocates for the Department of Education and the teachers unions are like, we just have to spend more money. And they kept spending more money. The schools don't improve. It's the same thing with ICE and immigration and anything else. I always apply that rule to the Pentagon, one of the most wasteful parts of government that never gets audited or can't pass an audit. And they just keep giving them more money. So yeah,
it's confusing though too. Department of Justice, they just want it to go right to the states, right? That's kind of what the conservatives want.
Yeah, if we're not getting rid of education, the states will be in charge of education, probably improve it. So yeah, the federal government should have never been in charge of this at all. And people that freak out when you hear, getting rid of the Department of Education led by Linda McMahon per this show. The Department of Education was instituted by Jimmy Carter in 1979. That's how not old it is. I mean, and Ronald Reagan, when he ran in 80, one of his things was he promised to get rid of it. And here we are in 2025. It looks like Trump might be finally doing that, which is good. So we'll see.
With Linda, what's she been up to? I know if let's say you get rid of the Department of Education, what is her role? What is her job? Like, what is she going to be doing for the Trump administration?
Well, that was the joke from Trump, and the joke from her is like her job is to work herself out of a job. she's the head of the Department of Education. She's trying to collapse it, and good. And I don't know what's next. She worked for a Trump PAC after Trump's first term, where of course she was the head of the Small Business Administration. Look, Trump's a lot of things, but he's not stupid. We as wrestling fans know how instrumental Linda McMahon was after her husband bought the WWF from his dad, and getting to the first WrestleMania and all that, how instrumental she was on the business side. Vince was handling the creative. She's a smart businesswoman is the point I'm making, whether that's working with her husband and pro wrestling or working in the Trump administration, all businesses, as was her role in Trump's first term.
Yeah, if she does do that, well, what would she be doing? You know what I mean? If she does get rid of the Department of Education, what would she be doing though?
The latest reports I've read is that Trish Stratus might push her around in a wheelchair and she'll kick Vince McMahon in the balls. I think that's a good next step. Time to go back to that.
She needs to return. I feel like she was a great character. Maybe under the radar a bit. She was a great character.
She was great. It's funny. And this is in Glenn Jacobs' book. A lot of fans remember when he tombstoned her. He told everybody involved, he's like, this is going to be the worst tombstone you've ever seen in your entire life. And we watch it. Her fed's like 3 feet from the ground. He wasn't taking a chance on hurting this woman who Jim Cornette describes as the only normal McMahon. I think it's
And remember, Steve Austin gave her that stunner. It was like the lightest stunner you've ever seen. He's like, gently. He didn't want to hurt her.
Of course. I mean, an older woman who's also the wife of the guy who created all this and gives you your paycheck. So, yeah. And a nice person from everything I've ever gathered.
Yep. But I love it if it's Vince. Austin takes that steel chair and just 100 miles an hour, boom, right for his head. No protected chair shot, just takes the shot right to the head. So he doesn't care about Vince, but he was very nice to Linda. He liked Linda. You
got it. What a good sport she is, because obviously she's in the rest of her husband are and her daughter and son and son-in-law now, but like doesn't seem like somebody that would do that. But you're a good sport. It's the product. It's entertainment. She did it.
Going back to the big beautiful bill, what was it passed? Because it seemed very even all the way down to the last minute almost.
In the Senate, it was passed 50-50 with J.D. Vance, the vice president, being the decided vote. So it was 51-50. That's how close it was. Yeah.
Wow. Has that happened before where it's that close?
I'm trying to think. Remember John McCain with the Obamacare? He saved Obamacare when all the Republicans were trying to do something different. So there's been instances like that. And it shows you how much power one senator can have. when it's like that. So, Rand Paul didn't vote for it, but, 50-50 they got there between both parties. So not unheard of, but not the usual either.
Why would McCain want that, though? Was there something to his interest?
He, at the time, as much as I recall, look, I can't, at my age, I can't get catastrophic insurance, which is what I really want. I'm very healthy. Every time I go to the doctor, I feel like a jerk because, like, you're fine, even at your age. But if I got cancer or some serious disease, I would want financial backup, right? In Obamacare, if you're over 30, certainly am, you can't buy it. I'm not allowed in the United States as a free citizen. If somebody wants to sell me catastrophic care, I can't buy it. That's one thing among many with Obamacare. It also does some good things. People with pre-existing health conditions are better protected than they used to be, so it's a mixture. But a lot of these really bad things, you remember that you had the penalty for if you didn't have health insurance, you would have to pay penalty every year. I think they got rid of that finally. But all that was going on when this debate was going on with John McCain. And he wanted to side with the Democrats and ignore all these Republican opposition or criticisms of Obamacare, of which there are many. And that's not the first time he's done that. When he ran for president in 2000 and him and George W. Bush were hot and heavy, he was running as the centrist moderate. Look at me. I'm not like these bad Republicans. And he was the maverick, if anybody's old enough to remember that election cycle. Yep. So he does that. And that was a part of that. And you'll remember at the time that Democrats were like, oh, John McCain, such a man of honor. He's so wonderful. I respect his service, but he was a total jerk. That's just kind of what he would do from time to time. And that was part of that at that time.
I was just talking to somebody very in with the MMA world and stuff like that. And I was asking him for a little bit of a history lesson on McCain and UFC. And I was like, wow, what a shady, shifty kind of dude, because behind the scenes, he's trying to get rid of MMA. He says it's no holds barred. It's barbaric. They're going to kill each other, blah, blah, blah. And then you really read into it. And it was all because his wife was so invested in Budweiser and boxing that they were going against UFC, which was not like, I was like, wow, that's so crazy that he was acting like he was being like a true, I'm trying to save these guys' lives. They're going to have head issues and trauma and they're going to kill each other and it's barbaric. Or maybe my wife had special interest with boxing and Budweiser and advertising. Yeah. Wow, shady dude.
Very shady. And that happens all the time where people have reasons other than their purported reasons for making these moves. And of course, naturally, people kind of thought MMA might overtake boxing, which is kind of disorganized and hard to follow. But if you got this one company, UFC, that it has even bought the other smaller companies, Bellator and other things that were happening, that it would surpass boxing. Plus, you could do more than just punch people. And that's kind of what's happened. UFC is a big deal. It's why TKO bought WWE. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me. John McCain was doing that. Look, when he would, I think we talked about this last time, when he would call my boss, Rand Paul, a Putin puppet and all this kind of stuff, he was carrying out the neoconservatives' pro-war agenda. It's pro-Halliburton, it's pro-Raytheon, it's the defense contractors. That's who he's carrying water for, pretending like he wants to defend democracy. So this happens all the time, and I'm not shocked that it happened with his MMA stance and his wife's business interests.
And I know people hate it, but it was kind of funny the way Trump would like tear him down and says, well, I like, good soldiers, not prisoners of war, stuff like that, which I feel like got him some babyface reactions. You know what I mean? I feel like that kind of got McCain over because people are like, wow, that's so mean that he said that. I can't believe he said that. Yeah,
and Trump kind of steps on his own junk sometimes when he says stuff like that. I'm not quite sure what he was trying to say. I don't think he legitimately disrespects anybody's service, but he does what a lot of people do when he's mad at somebody. He thinks of the worst thing they could say about him, and that's what he says. That's when, don't want to go much further than that, but that's what people do sometimes, whether it's genuine or not. It should be looked at because you want to know somebody's heart, but you're right. Some people cheered that and others questioned it a little bit like I did.
Now, I got to mention, we were talking about the big, beautiful Bill. So we got to talk about the other big, beautiful Bill. Big, beautiful Bill Goldberg. A little bit of wrestling tie-in here. What do you think about not only the return of Goldberg, are you interested in this return? Is this his last match? And what do you think about Saturday night's main event versus Gunther?
So I'm interested to see it. I like Goldberg. I am from South Carolina and WCW in Atlanta and grew up on Jim Crockett. I'm just saying that's, the territory. Goldberg's part of the latter WCW, the only star that they ever produced on their own. I should say that Eric Bischoff ever produced on his own. I'm interested. I'm way more interested as a fan in All In that day. And I understand that they booked Saturday night's main event thinking All In would be a nighttime thing, which they moved to 3, which I actually preferred at night because I won't get into that. But I'm interested to see it, but not as interested as I am in, like, Kenny Omega's match that day and what Hangman and Moxley are going to do. I think Goldberg, if he's going to have a last match, should do it now. I thought he looked a little older than I'm used to when he got in Gunther's face the other night on Raw and telling him you're next. Have a short match. Obviously, Gunther goes over in Goldberg's hometown in classic WWE style. I don't think Goldberg needs to beat Gunther. That's not good for Gunther. I don't think he needs to have the world title. So let Gunther beat him, be an honorable wrestler and go out on your back. It'll be a fun moment and call it a day. And I bet it'll be entertaining. So I'm looking forward to it. But that's the 10th thing I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about All In way more on that day.
So interesting thing to me is I know I've listened to an interview with like DDP, and even his son Gage was saying he has the itch and this might not really be his last match. Wouldn't it be crazy if they kind of teased it was his last match and it's really not his last match? Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah, I mean, if you can work it out somehow, if his son's going to be involved, maybe he for that. But when Stone Cold came back and he fought with Kevin Owens, that was cool for what it was, but nobody's expecting him really to come back as a wrestler and be part of the roster and be, what I mean? I think Goldberg's in that category. You might disagree, but he's not a guy that's part of the mix. He's just a guy like, oh, he might be able to still do it one time. Okay, well, let's see, and that's even questionable based on what he did with Roman and Saudi that time and all sorts of other things. So we'll see.
It is interesting because I remember when he came back 2017 with Lesnar, that was great. And they had 2 good matches, Survivor Series and WrestleMania. And then in 2021, he had that great match in Saudi with Lashley. But then obviously age catches up and there's like some stinkers in there and there's some other stuff going on. Like the Undertaker match wasn't that great. The Reigns match probably could have been better. I mean, there was definitely some give and take there. But it's just interesting to see what they'll do with him and Gunther. I mean, they got to keep it 2 to 3 minutes, I would imagine. I would hope.
It's not going to be long. Gunther's good enough to carry him. That's not, I'm not a wrestler. I don't know, but Gunther's the younger, healthier guy, and he's good, and he has good matches. It would be funny if the special referee was Bret Hart. I don't think he'd ever agree with that, but how funny would that be?
I love that Gunther all those months ago said to Goldberg, he goes, my favorite wrestler is Bret Hart. And then he, really antagonizing Goldberg. I was like, wow, that is great. I love that he brought that up because you would think he wouldn't bring that up, but that's great that he did just to bust his balls a bit.
Yeah, and I wonder if they asked Bret Hart or he asked Bret Hart first. Maybe not. I don't know, but that's how those things go sometimes. But I loved it too. I like when they inject real life into it. I think MJF said something. A lot of people don't like when one company mentions the other company or other things outside of it. I think that could be overdone. Bret Hart's not outside the WWE, but there's just something going on beyond the Gunther Goldberg storyline that happened in the past and that fans know about. But MJF said something like, hey, it's 2025. People know that both companies exist, and some of us have been in both, and it's okay to talk about and shut up, basically, in his MJF fashion. But I tend to agree with that. Come on. We're adults. We have social media. We're more interconnected in society than ever. Yeah, the WWE exists and the AEW exists. They bring up AEW without saying the name on WWE television. Cody's done it, talking about being a disruptor. They've called Dean Ambrose John Moxley on there. Seth Rollins has said that. So, that's what's happening, and that's okay. And I think that's fun for fans.
And I don't know if you'll remember this, but last year, Drew McIntyre remember when CM Punk had that great press conference thing and he called Adam Page an empty-headed FECK and all that other stuff. Yeah. McIntyre literally kind of copied and pasted that, and he wrote that to Seth Rollins, but he changed the name. He goes, "You're an empty-headed," and so it's like the guys do bring stuff up that people know what they're talking about. I mean, he literally was word for word tweeted it out and sent it out, but he changed to Seth Rollins.
Yeah, I thought that was great. He was mocking Punk by doing, all fans know they might not watch AEW, but they sure as hell know about this press conference he did this one time that led to other things. So.
Yeah. Hell, remember MJF had that storyline where he said he was going to WWE and that screw this place. So, I mean, they mention it all the time. Why not? Who cares?
It's totally fine. Vince never intended to be a character on his own show in the 90s before he did the angle with Austin and before the Bret Hart screw job and all that. People thought he was just an announcer. Some people didn't even know he was the owner of that whole story. But he became involved. Why? Because the market called for it. they wanted to see him and Stone Cold. It was one of the best angles in the history of that company. But I don't think he had planned to do that. It just kind of happened. That's not me saying, Tony Khan, you should be on TV. Tony Khan's a part of it. They say, Tony Khan just told us this. Tony Khan just announced. I kind of like
Right.
he's there, he's the owner. It's very clear, but you don't really see him. I think that's kind of cool.
He actually said recently he does not want to be back on camera and do angles and stuff.
Yeah.
The last time, I guess he got beat up, he was kind of really trying to make it all about the draft and kind of get it, basically wearing the neck brace and get attention for AEW through the draft. And I feel like he was basically saying that's all he really wants to do. He doesn't really want to be a character per se.
Yeah, and there's some people that shouldn't be on wrestling TV, including billionaires. I'm a small guy, have a relatively small frame. I absolutely love professional wrestling. I have no business being anywhere in any ring trying to be some tough guy or something like that. And Tony's kind of like that. Not that he's ever tried to be a tough guy, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it's okay just to be a fan or an owner or a booker and not be on TV. Yeah, so I agree with his view on that.
And just going back to like mentioning the other company, remember Bischoff? He literally gives spoilers for Raw when you're watching Nitro.
Mm-hmm.
He literally would be like, "Oh, Michaels, beat Sid with a kick that wouldn't beat a eighth grade karate kid or whatever he would say." But he was basically telling you, "No need to watch Raw. Here's all the spoilers," and he'd give it away on Nitro.
And that's when Bischoff and WCW started getting their ass kicked with the Mick Foley comment that Tony Schiavone was directed to give. So sometimes it could come back to bite you. But to your point, they were injecting part of the success of WCW at that time was the NWO and trying to be more real instead of cartoonish, which is exactly what WWE was trying to do and didn't know any better until somebody showed them a better way and started beating them. So,
quick question here about the tariffs, because I wanted to bring this up to you. Good idea, bad idea? Like, what do we think? Did people make too much of it? I mean, it doesn't seem like it has affected us yet, but it could next week, right? It could affect us.
It could. I'm a libertarian-leaning conservative who votes Republican typically, but not always. I'm against tariffs in principle because they're a tax passed on to the consumer. Nobody who has tariffs slapped on their goods on either side is going to be like, oh, I'm going to make less money this year. They just raise the prices to offset that, and people have to pay more money. Now, tariffs as a leveraged threat, like, you better do what I want, country X, or I'm going to slap this tariff on and getting what you want, that's a different story. And it looks like President Trump has been successful in some ways with some of that. But yeah, I'm against them in principle. If you keep them enacted, prices are going to go up. It happens every time. But, using them as a threat, if you can get something out of it, I don't have a problem with that.
Do you think people maybe overreacted, or you think that kind of the right reaction to the tariffs?
I think
even me, at first I was like, man, this is crazy. What are we doing here?
I think it's the right reaction. I think it's a healthy reaction. I worry about in our politics the things that people don't react to negatively anymore. So, like, I think it's healthy for people to whoa, tariffs, that's a bad idea. I just know that from the outset. When I voted in this election cycle, which is the only time I ever voted for him, a big part of that for me, this isn't about tariffs, but it's about people knowing better, Americans knowing better. It was Democrats' increasing acceptance of censorship. So when Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger and the Twitter Files reporters reported what they found out, they had a mountain of evidence. They were finding out that the Biden administration was directly threatening Twitter and other Facebook and social media platforms. Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, has said that since then. He's like, yes, it's happened. You can't post stuff about this or censor information about this, whether it was COVID or stuff that was not beneficial to the Biden administration. The federal government directly manipulating, censoring, directing, misdirecting American speech is a blatant violation of the First Amendment and your most basic rudimentary free speech principles. I saw Democrats in public life and friends of mine who just hate Trump and would vote Democrat no matter what say, I'm mad at Matt Taibbi. Why is he misrepresenting what the Biden administration is doing? This is a good thing. In fact, we need more regulation of the media. That's what they said on The View the day after Trump won. We need to regulate the media. I saw increasing acceptance of this view that the government should regulate speech to Democrats' delight or and that was okay. I'm like, these people need to be obliterated at the ballot box. No, to hell with this. And the Republicans are now being hypocritical too, and now wanting to censor people who are critical of Israel's government, and that's wrong too. But you have Tucker Carlson, Margie Taylor Greene, you have people on the right saying that kind of censorship is wrong too. Don't do it. It's a fight between figures on the right who think that kind of censorship of criticizing Israel's government is bad, and neoconservatives who don't mind it because of whatever. On the left, to a man, yeah, censorship is good. We can't have misinformation. Well, what is that? Oh, that's hate speech or saying something we don't like. They were growing so comfortable with that. I'm like, you just got to kick their ass. So as with tariffs, you asked if that was the right reaction. Yes, I think that's a healthy reaction. People are like, oh, this is bad. When they learn from the Twitter files, Americans at large, hey, the government is censoring your speech directly. Yep. Everybody, Democrat and Republican, should be like, we can't have that. This is America. We have a First Amendment and free speech. One of the major parties was like, good. Why are these reporters reporting this? I'm mad at them. Members of Congress berated them. Like, how dare you report this? So, yeah, when you lose, as we head to the 4th of July, this will come out after our conversation here today. When you get rid of those all-American principles like that, and people lose that sense of what American freedom looks like and are willing to discard it. Yeah, that scares the hell out of me, whether it's the Republican Party or Democratic Party.
I always find that very strange. So you could censor stuff if they don't agree with it, but if they do agree with it, then don't censor it. I always find it very funny and a real slippery slope of it, especially the First Amendment. It's like, that is just absolutely insane. Like, even when you're thinking about it, it's nuts.
And you had people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Trump on occasion saying we have to protect free speech. And, then Trump was a little hypocritical about it after he won. But at least they were saying you hadn't valued it and thought it was a good idea. You would see articles in left-wing or progressive academic journals and even not so academic journals, places like The Atlantic and The New Republic, how free speech became right-wing. And they were saying that, like, yeah, free speech is bad. How conservatives hide behind free speech to spread their hate. But like they were developing this consensus, they being the left, that free speech was a bad thing. F you. Yeah, I'm not even going to debate you. Just going to beat your ass when the election comes, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah. I don't know what to do with that. This is how the conversation would go with some of my Democrat friends, people I've known for years that I love, even some family. I believe in free speech. Do you believe in free speech, Democrat person? Of course I believe in free speech. We all believe in free speech. I think I have a right to opinion and you have a right to opinion, and that's free speech. Oh, yes, I believe that. I think even, this is me talking, I think even hate speech, misinformation, or lies is protected speech. You can say whatever you want. That's when they'd say, no, you can't have hate speech. You can't put out stuff that's misinformation. Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's VP running mate, said on MSNBC, there's no First Amendment protections for hate speech. Yet tell that to Nazis in Skokie, Illinois in 1978 when the ACLU won their case saying, yes, even this speech is protected. That is the basic American understanding of free speech, because then that gets to, we can all agree that Nazi speech is hate speech, but we can also agree that in this country it's protected. Who decides what hate speech? Well, Kamala Harris told us when she was campaigning that she would sic the Department of Justice on platforms that hosted hate speech. I can tell you right now that she and her Democrat friends think that anybody who's conservative and holds views they disagree with are in some way hate speech. You see what we're getting at. So in a party, the Democrats at the time, and even probably now, that agrees that censorship is good, free speech is bad, and that we can use the levers of government to control it, I don't want to see what that looks like. And thank God right now we're not.
And kind of in that vein, especially sticking with Kamala here, is this true? What I was reading before, is this true? $16 million lawsuit going on here with the Paramount losing because the CBS interview that they heavily edited. Is this true?
I don't know enough about that to speak on it. I know what you're talking about, but this is a thing I've always done in talk radio or any forums, and people compliment me on it. If I don't know, I don't pretend. So I don't know the answer to that one, John.
I know there was a lawsuit, but I was reading before. I think it was the LA Times, I think, put it out saying that Trump is going to win $16 million. But I don't know. So, sometimes people put it out there, and then it's like, wait, was it really the LA Times? You click the link and it says it, but it's really not. So I'm going to have to look into that further. But I know there was a lawsuit pending about that.
Yeah, that's people talk about misinformation and proper sourcing, which is what you're talking about. I look at all that like Wikipedia. Like you can look at Wikipedia to get a general idea of something, but you better follow it up. That can't be your source. You got to be like, all right, I saw this. Let me go check it out. Same thing. This is the Los Angeles Times. All right, they lie sometimes, just like CNN and all the other establishment legacy outlets, but they tell the truth a lot too. Just double check. And I don't go to, some kooky right-wing site and just believe everything they say on its face, but they might be saying some true things, so I double check.
Yep.
And that's all any of us can do in this era with social media and the way things are.
Even with Eric Bischoff, who we were talking about earlier with WCW, I remember this has got to be like 7 years ago. I remember sitting at a bar with him, and I know I think him and Conrad talked about this on 83 Weeks on his podcast about how Wikipedia is wrong. So I was talking to him. We might be sipping back on some Coors Lights there and just hanging out. And I was saying, "Oh, I didn't realize your birthday, blah blah blah." And he was like, "Let me see where you're getting that from. It's not my birthday." So we looked it up, and it was wrong. And he even said, "He goes, look, this is my birthday." So I was like, "Wow, Wikipedia, not double sourcing here, not like they were getting the famous guy's birthday wrong. Like, what the hell?"
I can tell you for a fact, if you go to my Wikipedia right now, unless anyone's finally changed it, I have a friend that does that. I don't know how to do it, or they won't let me do it for whatever reason. But my name is Jack Wayne Hunter. My father's name, my late father, is Jack William Hunter Jr. They have me listed as my father's name. I dated a girl, I don't know, 15 years ago who was younger than me. And she goes, "We need to talk one day." I was like, all right, that's usually not good coming from your partner. She goes, "You lied to me. You're 2 years older than you told me." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she looked at my Wikipedia. It had me listed as 2 years older than I actually was. So, yeah, it's rampant on Wikipedia and in other things.
I just there's no problem with some of that stuff, but it is misinformation. Let's be honest, and it is protected. They can do it, but yeah, there is a lot of misinformation going on. I mean, there's just some stuff I was reading on there, even wrestling stuff that like I'll follow. I'm just like, oh, let's see what Wikipedia just overall view. I'm like, I know that's not true. That didn't like even me just as knowing wrestling for as long. I was like, there's so much misinformation on there. It's like kind of crazy. You can't use that as a source.
And that's all. You can't use it as a source. Be smart, but it's all protected speech under the First Amendment. I could say that Hulk Hogan never lies. And we can all laugh at that, but that's protected speech. I'm free to say that. You're free to be like, yeah, that's not true.
A friend of mine was saying that, and I said, you know what? I was like, I don't think he lies because, as George Costanza said, it's not a lie if you believe it.
I guess so. Does he really believe it though?
Yeah. I think honestly, I think a little bit. I think he's working a little bit. Like it depends on who he's talking to. Like remember the interview where he said he slammed Andre the Giant and Andre died 7 days later. I feel like the guy he felt like the guy knew nothing, so he's like, I'm just gonna throw this out there and like, see like depends on who he's talking to.
Yeah, I don't know how much I told last week on the podcast about Ricky Morton telling me fabricated over the years just to work with fan and spend some time with me and say something that's rock and roll, and I appreciate it as a fan. I know he's working, but I don't think he really believes any of that. I guess it depends on the person.
That was like what I was just telling you about Jericho too. Jericho's working me about that Fozzy concert. He was working me. I didn't know it, but it's just one of the fun things where I don't think he's being like malicious. He just thinks it's funny. Like I'm going to work this guy and he's going to love it. And he's just trying to get a laugh. It's
funny talking about working in wrestling. I like in this day and age when the wrestlers work us as fans.
Yes.
The maddest I've been in any product in recent memory was during the CM Punk Young Bucks controversy after the scuffle, the brawl in or whatever they were calling it. I told every wrestling fan I know personally, and we're in a group thread and hang out and chat. I'm like, Tony Khan's not this stupid. CM Punk's not this stupid. The Young Bucks aren't this stupid. None of them are this unprofessional. I'm not saying this was a work from the get-go, but they're going to make money off this, and it's going to be a big deal. This could be the game changer for AEW and competing with WWE. I was convinced of that, and then it didn't happen. And I was like, you guys suck. You suck. And if it's the Young Bucks that did, the reports I heard, and once again, source in question, was that the Punk was down to do business, Omega was down to do business, Hangman was down to do business, Tony Khan certainly was down to do business, and the Young Bucks would not. That's true, and I've been a Young Bucks fan. I did lose a little respect from a professional standpoint, and as a fan, good God, Edge stole Matt Hardy's girlfriend. They turned it into something. That's perfect. Why? Because the boss said we're going to make money off of it. That's what you do.
Yep.
And it didn't happen. And that AEW is actually great right now. I think it's improved and has benefited from WWE not being quite as good as it was maybe a year ago. But they still needed some kind of big thing to take them to the next level. And I was just convinced that was it and that you wouldn't pull the trigger when the guy that they end up releasing was down to do business.
Yep.
I was no, and I'm a huge Punk fan then and now. And I know he's, mentored by Harley Race and Terry Funk and people like that. And you do business. Yeah.
Yep. It is crazy though. Like for a while, I kind of cooled off on AEW, but I think a ton of fans cooled off on them for a while. I don't know if they thought maybe Edge would come in, he could replace Punk. Obviously, that wasn't the case. They kind of felt that. I mean, Punk's a huge star. I've been to shows where he's not on the card. WWE shows recently. He's not on the card. They announce him for the card. You literally see 4,000 ticket spike, 7,000 ticket spike. Not even exaggerating those numbers either, because I was literally about to buy the tickets. I'm like, holy crap, I better buy them now on MSG because it's spiked. It's at 12,000 now. It's at 16,000. There was that Raw where he fought Rollins in the cage. My son wanted to go. Obviously, I wanted to go. It went from 12,000 to 19,000 tickets sold. So it's like this guy is a draw, and AEW obviously blew it with that one. That for a while that was a mistake. I feel like now they're starting to regain momentum. And God, that was 2 years ago.
It was, and especially if you and Warner Brothers are using the phrase "challenge your brand," you're acknowledging we're not as big as WWE. We haven't been around as long as WWE, but we're a challenger brand, and we're here to be serious and do business. There wasn't a figure in wrestling that represented what that could be more than CM Punk.
Yeah. Yep.
He was, and I love Adam Copeland, but I like what he's doing in AEW, but it's not in the parameters of what Punk meant to AEW when he was there. It's just different.
And people kind of maybe underestimate him as a draw. We saw how much more business AEW was doing with him, and obviously sold out buildings. They didn't even mention his name, and they sold 21,000 tickets in Chicago on the thought that he would show up. You know what I mean? They, like, what if he didn't show up? Well, they sold 21,000 tickets, right? I
think the two people in WWE who fans are very disappointed if they aren't going to see, number one, Cody Rhodes, and I think then CM Punk. Roman for a time, and maybe even still, but those first two, Cody, then Punk number two. I went to a birthday party in Charlotte, which is wrestling. He rented a skybox for a Monday Night Raw a couple weeks, 2-3 months ago. And I'd never experienced that. That's awesome. You have your own bathroom and they bring you food and alcohol. It's great. So, but Cody was not on that Raw at all. But guess what? He was on after the show went off the air. Here comes Cody for a quick match because those people need to see that. It's like Hogan must pose. Kids want to see Cody. If their parents spent what they're charging on tickets these days to take their kid to see Cody and they got the Cody gear on and they don't see that, that ain't happening. I think Punk's kind of in that too. There's a lot of people that want to see him and are disappointed if they don't.
Man, it kind of reminds me of even Hogan. Yes, definitely. We had a scene pose at the end of the show, but Stone Cold Steve Austin for a while. I went to a Heat taping because I wanted tickets for WrestleMania 15. You had to go to this taping in December of 98 to go to the show in 99. Yes, a lot different back then with tickets. You had to get the paper and whatever. We ended up being first row. Me, my buddy, my brother, and my buddy's dad. We were first row. Austin and Rock literally following us on the show. It's awesome. I have a picture of it. Just awesome stuff. But the moral story is that Heat, the dark match, if you will, was a four-way involving Austin. Everyone wanted to see Austin. All we cared about was like the stunner. Like the match is cool, everything else. Me and my buddy, this was 1998, so it's 27 years ago. Me and my buddy still talk about it to this day. Like, remember how many times he stunnered Shane McMahon? And then he gave him a beer, and Shane's so dumb he believes him. He's like, yeah. And then he turns around, another stunner. It's like that was so great. Vince was there. He ran in. He got a stunner. Boss Man ran in. We still talk about it, but we had to see. We didn't really care about Heat as much. I mean, we do. Kane was on the show. There's a bunch of other cool stuff, but it was all about we had to see Austin, and then we were happy. And we still talk about it 27 years later. We had to see Austin. We were happy with it.
It happened all those years ago, and it's something you and your friend still remember. Glenn Jacobs has said to me and in other places many, many times, good wrestling matches are awesome. Athleticism's awesome, but it's the moments in wrestling that people remember most. More people remember him doing yes and no with Bryan Danielson
So good.
than
Yeah.
some match he might have had, no matter how great or whatever. And even in those matches, it's moments, tearing off the door in his debut. That's the kind of stuff that people remember. And the people there that night wanted to see Stone Cold, and they did. And he did his Stone Cold thing by stunning
Yep.
Vince and all sorts of other people.
Yep.
And that's what you remember. When I was a kid, I can't tell you how many moves or what moves the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express did, but I remember that I saw them, and I remember that's the thing I wanted to see the most. So
Yep.
it's moments. That's true in politics too. Like, think about Trump. They remember him coming down the escalator, or just different things, getting shot at, things like that. Or even Reagan when I was a kid, that Hinckley shooting. That's things you remember more than a State of the Union address. It's just how human beings are wired, whether it's politics or wrestling, and we talk about both on the show. That's how people are.
Trump is like the master of the catchphrase too. Yeah, I think even more so than The Rock. Everything The Rock says, and even Jericho, like everything they say catches on. They sell T-shirts, like they don't know what the F they're doing. How many times have you heard that since he said that about Iran and Israel? Just so crazy. They don't know what the F they're doing. Like, and somebody made a song out of it. I'm like, oh my God, he's so quotable.
And it's a brand. What's the difference between MAGA and 316?
Nothing, right?
That's when you 360. You think about the Bible if you're a Christian, but also you think about, if you're a wrestling fan, you think about Stone Cold and how he turned that phrase with Jake Roberts and used it for his own branding. Same with MAGA. I mean, Make America Great Again. That was a slogan that was used during Reagan's time, and it was used by others, but Trump made it his own. And now we don't even say Make America Great Again. We just say MAGA, and we know we're talking about the Trump brand. Same as Stone Cold and his.
Yep. And the crazy thing too is, like, when you think about Trump, right? Him saying Biden, and they kind of like ended Biden right then. He goes, I don't know what he just said. He doesn't know what he just said. And people play that over and over, and like, boom, like that's the catchphrase, and that's over. Like Austin 316, I just whooped your ass. That's like Trump's Austin 316.
And Trump knows that. He knows how to work a crowd. There's been umpteen articles written about how he learned to be how he is with WWE. Well, I disagree with that. I think he was how he is before he got to WWE and just did that there too. Yeah, he knows how to work.
The funny thing is too, like with like that, just keeping in the Austin 316 vein, I was just recently looking at this meme, and this kid, apparently he really died for 3 minutes, or like he was unconscious, or he didn't know. He said that his life flashed before his eyes, and that God was wearing an Austin 316 shirt when he came back. So I was like, whoa! I was like, okay, maybe he's in on it. You know what I mean? He doesn't think it's blasphemy, as Jeff Jarrett coined the phrase. That was blasphemous of Austin to do that.
Right.
Apparently God is in on the joke. He didn't think that was too bad.
I think God has a sense of humor.
Yeah. Imagine that though. You're like looking at the pearly gates, and you're looking, and he's like, "Who's this guy with the Austin 316 shirt?" Oh, that's God. Oh, really? Okay, awesome. Like, well, I didn't know he was a fan.
This is totally unrelated to what we're talking about. And I am a Christian. I'm not trying to talk about that. But when Darby Allin and Sting were teaming up, I forgot who they were fighting, but Darby Allin had like crazy nerves, right? I don't know if you've ever heard this story about something, which was unusual for him. This was Darby Allin. I was actually talking to RJ City and Renee, one of those shows.
Oh, yeah,
Darby
okay.
was talking to them, and Darby said to them, Sting saw while I was having trouble. He said, "Do you mind if I pray for you?" And Darby was like, "I don't believe anything. You can do whatever you want." And Sting did it. Darby instantly felt better.
Whoa, damn!
It worked, right there on the spot.
Yeah, it worked.
Match. But Darby wasn't professing that he believed anything. He's just like, "I'm telling you what happened." And that's what it was. So just a little food for thought there.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting thing to me about Sting and Darby.
Mm-hmm.
Sting could be at All In. Who knows? You never know, because he's at the StarCast, right? He's at the autograph signing. Mm-hmm. But to me, and I was just talking about my buddy about it, and he goes, "Oh, Adam Page has to win the world title. I said, no, he should lose. Darby should come out at the end, and then you set up the pay-per-view for September. That's what I would do. That's just me. But I would have Moxley win. I don't know about you. I want Darby to be champ, not Adam Page.
Yeah. My girlfriend thinks, and seems to be the prevailing wisdom among a number of wrestling fans, people with podcasts and just regular old fans, I still think Hangman wins. I think that pay-per-view ends with a new champion, and it's not Moxley, and it's a guy they're all going to cheer for who already organically is getting pushed. Like, Hangman's over. His first run, I supported it. I've always been a Hangman Page fan, but I compare it to like Ric Flair was world champion before he won it from Harley. And even he says that didn't mean as much as when I finally won it the second time. I think this could be that kind of thing for Hangman. And I hope that for him and the company. And if what you just said happens, that also would be pretty badass. If Darby pops up and Sting somewhere in the mix, that would be pretty cool too. People are aching for Darby to come back. So these are good problems to have. Do I go with the Hangman character I have that is people are loving, or the Swerve guy over here who's certainly been a world champion already and is that, or this Ospreay guy who's definitely going to get it eventually? Or do we bring back Darby, who's in that mix? That's a good problem to have that many top talents, seen as top talents, are top talents.
Not a big Page guy, but I do love Darby. I don't know, there's something about him. I mean, he's just like a little cannonball. Like he's just like, even like him versus Brody King. Like you're like, oh, this is not believable. Look how small. Somehow those matches are super believable, and he's awesome in them. Like I know I like him, especially against bigger opponents, just because he just goes nuts.
He is. He lays it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about Darby, and he said this openly, like, I know I'm not going to have a long career because of how I wrestle. Like, I kind of like to see you have a long career because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But I also don't get mad at any of his matches. Like, good God, he does not hold back. So it is what it is.
Literally exactly reminds me, obviously not about the personal stuff away from the business, but he reminds me of Jeff Hardy, where it's like, man, does this guy really need to take that bump off the ladder and land on his own ass? You know what I mean? Like, oh, you could tell he, like, oh, that hurt or that injured. Or, oh, does he need to take a spear off of a 27-foot ladder? Like, dude, like, come on.
Mick Foley did that, and he was a star. He didn't have to, but that was part of the Mick Foley brand, is I'm going to do this. And he did, and, he's still with us, thank God, but doesn't get around so great. And
if you look at it, he retired when he was like 34 or something like that. You know what I mean? He should have had at least 16 more years in the business of in-ring. It's crazy.
Right, but look at like Randy Orton's age and what an athlete. He doesn't do any of that crazy stuff, and I think he's going to be around for a while. So there's that too.
Yes. Which is funny when you look at Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, and Miz. Remember they had that kind of going back and forth, and he's like, well, you're injured because you're that style. He goes, and I've never been injured. Yeah, so it like depends on the style you work. Yeah,
there's something to it, and I think when AEW says we're the best wrestled, I think WWE's wrestling has actually gotten better under Triple H. That Raw that just happened, and I know this is coming out with the tag team match with the New Day and the Judgment Day. Like I wasn't whatever, and it was like great. It was absolutely fantastic. So they do that a lot and a lot more than they used to. Wrestle a little different than they used to under Vince, but AEW is still the top where like you're going to see some badass stuff in the ring. There's anybody in WWE does in the ring that impresses me more than what Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland do in the ring. And that's not an insult to them. Cody Rhodes is like my favorite wrestler right now, but I don't want to see him wrestling like that. I want to see him telling the stories and the kids and all that kind of stuff. I want to see Will Ospreay kill it in the ring, and that's what he does. It's just different things.
Ospreay could be the best wrestler in the world. You literally put him in there with anybody. He has a good match.
He's in that Omega Okada category when they were in their prime, and they still might be. I'm not taking that away from them. Just Will Ospreay's a little younger, and he's more mature now than he was, in his 20s.
I'm going to tell you something I told my buddy, too, and he didn't like it. He thought this was controversial. I wouldn't have Moxley Adam Page as the main event. I would have Omega Okada as the main event. That's just me. I'm a New Japan guy. I love that stuff. But he's like, you're nuts. You can't do that. Blah, blah. I'm like, but it's a title unification. It's like one of the biggest feuds, as far as non-WWE feuds.
I would say, look, I enjoyed watching their stuff in Japan too, and I didn't watch all of Japanese wrestling, but I know about the big stuff and the Bullet Club stuff and all that. In front of close to 20,000 people, which is what it's looking like in Texas.
Yep.
How many of those people are familiar with the Omega Okada feud? I don't know the answer to that question,
but
I think you know with the American stars, one of which has their world title. What you do, and that match that Omega and Okada can just be badass on its own, but it doesn't have to be last.
Sometimes I might be too much of a mark. You know what I mean? Like I know I have all these matches. Like I've watched them a bunch. Like it's like maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe you do go with Moxley, the former WWE guy that everybody knows, and Page, or like maybe your most over babyface. But I don't know. For me, I just think Omega is like when I think of AEW, especially originally, I think of Omega. So I was like, he should be in the main event. And Okada's his biggest rival, so why not? But that's maybe a controversial take because a lot of AEW fans shut that down.
Think about it in WrestleMania 3 terms. Looking back, should Hogan slamming Andre and winning should have been the main event, 1000%. That
Yeah.
Hulkamania was the top thing going on. Was the best match on the card not Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat? It absolutely was. But what does that matter compared to the story of Hogan and Andre? You see what I'm saying?
Yep. Funny, I was reading an old Vince interview recently. Not that he was putting down Savage and Steamboat.
Mhm.
They were like trying to pump it up to him. He goes, it was exactly what it was supposed to be. He goes, it was nowhere near as good as Hogan Andre. And like, like you would be like, oh, taken aback. But I know what he meant because Hogan Andre drew the house. You know what I mean? And the moment.
You have to think about, he's the booker and promoter. What's good? I like that Conrad Thompson points out, like, if you're talking about the best Horseman, Ric Flair might say Michael. And we're like, as fans, we're like, no, Barry Windham, even Dean Malenko, some not, obviously Tully and Arn and Molly and all that. What Rick means is Mongo like to go out and party and chase women. That's what he means. And in Rick's mind, being a horseman, he's thinking of that first and foremost, maybe more than the ring stuff. So you have to qualify. It's the same with Vince saying that Hogan and Andre was the best. That was no great wrestling match, but the story was, history making. So you got to think of where these people are coming from. Ric Flair is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, but that's not what he was thinking about first when asked who's, what his favorite horseman. He's thinking about partying. So.
Yes. It is funny because I remember I talked to Arn about it, and he was saying Mongo fit them so well, and people didn't realize how well, because Flair and Arn are huge football fans. They were like, they love Mongo, so they go out drinking with him, and Mongo would want to go to cheerleaders. Strip club or whatever, and they're all drinking and hanging out and getting women. He goes, but they're asking him about like, hey, what was Mike Singletary like? So they love talking about football and stuff too.
Yeah, just guy stuff. We're guys, we're sports fans. We're also professional wrestlers, but that connection. I think that's what Kevin Nash has said. He and Flair bonded most over just football and talking about sports and stuff like that. And I totally get that. I'm not a big sports guy. I watch professional wrestling. I like anything with fighting, MMA, boxing. I'll watch it, but I don't keep up with it.
Yep.
Professional wrestling. I don't watch football. I don't watch baseball. I don't watch hockey. I will. I'm not against it. It's just, people's brains work differently.
It is crazy to think too. Arn and Flair were kind of saying like Ole's not like Horseman material, which is like insane. It's like he's like an original Horseman. What do you mean? And Ole would even be like the Horseman, like almost like dismissed. It's like, whoa, how crazy is that?
Yeah, they would all go out partying, and he'd go home and save his money, which is probably the smarter thing to do in retrospect.
Yes.
I remember going to one of the early Greg Price NWA Legends Fan Fest. One of the first 2 or 3, early 2000s. You and I have been at some of those together, and it was a Q&A with Ole. And I hadn't read his book at this point, and I knew he was not the partier. I was old enough to know as a Horseman fan, and Flair's my favorite, that like he was a little different. But I was taken aback by how dismissive he was of the whole Horseman era and all of that. And, he considered like teaming with Gene Anderson and all that was his peak. That was the real stuff. And I'm too young to remember that. I know about it because I grew up in South Carolina, and people older than me and Jim Crockett and all that kind of stuff, and County Hall here in Charleston every Friday night and the fights that went on there. But he was just, everybody sitting there with like Horseman stuff and doing this and doing it. And I think he's glad he made money, but he had no special affection for it and was very dismissive. And I was surprised by that.
Crazy too. And like even the guys were like, we would rather have, like Barry or Luger, like a young guy, and than the original Horseman, because he wasn't quote unquote Horseman material as far as he didn't party with them. He didn't, stay up all night. Woo,
And they were for real. I might have said this in the last podcast. When I was a child, I'm talking about single digits, 10, 11, 12 years old. My parents were partiers. In fact, my 72-year-old mother is still known to party.
Nice.
To go out to places and, have a couple drinks. But when they were in their, when they were young and I was a child, I'm talking about like late 20s. My dad was 7 years older than my mom, late 20s, early 30s. They would go to the hot spots in Charleston all the time. And when wrestling was in town on Friday nights, they would usually see Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan together. That was the era where they were tag teaming. And they would come home where they were like, Jackie, we saw Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan last night at the Ramada Inn on Rivers Avenue. And then Rick would go on TV and be like, we were partying last night. And I was like, this is totally 100% real.
Yeah.
Eyewitness accounts from my parents who don't even like wrestling all the time. So there's something magical about that.
Yes.
And I'll never forget it. And I was a fan watching it with my friend on TV. And then when that happens, you're glued, addicted for life.
Love that. Now, you got a Four Horsemen shirt on. Now, who is, as we were winding it down here, who's your favorite horseman?
I've always gonna. Well, it was Flair. I mean, he's the guy. But oh, here we go. If you can see there, pretty funny. This was a Jim Crockett design. The few T-shirts or posters they had, and this is a bootleg that I got off the internet from somebody. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But obviously, Flair's my favorite horseman. My favorite, and Tony Schiavone says this is the original lineup with Ole just because it's the original. And I will do the cliche thing. I think the Barry Windham lineup was probably the best functionally and all that. And that's what I'm not breaking ground there by saying that. I liked Mongo as a horseman from the partying aspect. I wasn't looking to see great matches, but I thought he gelled well with them. I like when Dean Malenko did it towards the end because I thought he deserved it.
Yep.
You know, he kind of fit. We're not going to talk about Chris Benoit out of respect to what happened. But yeah, the original is always going to be the best. When they kicked Ole out, and I like when Lex was there. What I knew about Lex Luger and all that happened is this is the guy from Florida that I keep reading about in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. That was my knowledge of, because there's no internet. You just knew what you knew from magazines. Yep. Oh, wow, he is a big deal. Look at that big dude. You know, he has a cool haircut in 1986 or whatever it was. So, yeah.
It looks like $1 million. Yep.
Totally.
I do love that one, even though maybe not mentioned Benoit here, but I love Flair, Arn, Benoit, and Pillman together. I love that horseman. They just didn't get enough time together.
They didn't, and it worked for a time. And, you know, the WCW would always go back to the horsemen because they were a known commodity, and they were the precursor to the NWO and DX because all those guys were heels, and everybody loved them. They were cool heels, which is what those other factions were. And it was completely organic from that Arn Anderson promo on Saturday night on TBS. That stuff. That's why part of why I think Hangman's going to win. People are really getting behind him in a way like I've never seen before, and it's organic. I mean, they're booking him right, but the fans are doing what they would like them to do, but they don't have to do that, but they are. Same with the Horseman thing just blowing up. You know, Jim Crockett wasn't like, Arn, I think you should go on TV and say the phrase Four Horsemen, but no, he was like, damn, this is happening in my company. Great, let's run with it.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to go with it. If it's organic, you got to run with it. Run it with the ball with it as far as you can take it. But let's wind it down here, Jack. It's been went by very, very fast, by the way. I didn't realize, crazy. I love it. A little bit of wrestling, a little bit of politics in there, but you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. How about you, Jack? Where can everybody find and follow you?
You can find me on Twitter /X at JackHunter74. And at that, you can find pretty much everything I do. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle and on Facebook with the same handle and on TikTok with the same handle. But if you follow me on X, there's nothing that I do, whether it's politics, wrestling, or anything else that I don't share there.
Awesome. Jack, great. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We will see you right back here next week for a little Capital and Kayfabe. We'll see you then, folks.